What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia stock, ticker symbol NVDA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Monday, March 4th. Alright guys, pretty good day for Nvidia stock here, up 31 bucks and 67 cents a share, 4% on the dot here as of the close. It is up a couple extra points after hours. Listen, I know I would prefer, as a bull, to have the stock be up a couple points after hours than flat or down 2 points, right? But, as always, whether it's in your bias, or, supporting your bias, or going against your current sentiment, take that after hours movement with a grain of salt. Volume's always going to be really low unless we have a fresh catalyst, usually specific to the name. But let's take a look here at Nvidia, and let's start today with our daily 5-minute chart volume profile ritual. Taking a look and seeing, okay, were there any really obvious changes in volume that correlate with really obvious changes in stock price, taken in context based on the time of day? Okay, now I'm looking at this move here. I don't even know how many 5-minute candles in a row that is, and I'm not going to count, but let's take a look at the volume. And you can see that we actually saw a nice increase in volume and some sustained extra volume. By the time that move was over and the fade and consolidation occurred, we saw pretty substantially fading volume. Now, contextually to time of day, obviously this was earlier, and you would normally expect a little more volume than early afternoon, for example. But this was actually quite a bit more than what we had already seen earlier in the morning, where you would expect more volume on a typical day. So to me, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, in this very specific region, it's pretty obvious to me that the bulls kind of won that move, and a bigger sample size of the market was saying at that moment that, hey, Nvidia belongs higher. Now let's move on to the 30-minute chart and start getting contextual about levels that I'm paying close attention to as we head into Monday. Now, here on the 30-minute, we talked on Thursday night about how on Friday, I would want to see, at least that 50 period here on the 30-minute, making a hard move upside, get another psychological barrier, as many as possible, right? Up underneath any upside move that we see in the stock. Today, we got a nice little upside move. 4%, I wouldn't say is little, but a nice move, and we got a nice move in that 50 period as well. Last time we were talking about this thing, it was maybe 780, 785, and now we're looking at 804, 805. It's making light work of this move, and I want as many, if I'm a bull, right? I want as many psychological barriers to the downside as possible, as quickly as possible, every time we make a bigger upside move. Make a move up, get things to catch up and add psychological barriers as quickly as possible, right? If you're a bear, you kind of want the opposite of that. If the stock does move up and it goes against you, you want any psychological barriers staying downside. So bulls, you obviously want those coming upside. So it's good to see here on the 30-minute today. I like that from a bullish perspective. Now, come Monday, listen, of course, I just want to see a continuation, ideally, of the 50 period moving upside as fast as possible. Any retest of the 50 period out of the stock, going to want to see a hard, high volume hold there and bounce away. But really priority number one from a bullish perspective is get that 50 period up underneath the stock as quickly as possible. Any test, going to want to see that hold. All right, now the 4-hour chart, let's take a look here. You can see that, of course, as you see a stock making a more substantial, more aggressive upside move, it's going to take its time. These indicators, right? These self-fulfilling prophecy, just psychological indicators. That's the only reason I care, by the way. The longer the time frame, the more they're going to take their time, the slower they're going to move. And the more contextual, and I could argue important, they become. So I got to be honest with you guys, the only thing I really have to say about the 4-hour here, aside from that, I think it's nice that we saw that 50 period get above 760, right, which we talked about on a Thursday night. It is getting dragged upside, slowly, but it is happening. If I'm a bull on the 4-hour, of course, I don't really want to see a retest of that 50 period, because, in all reality here, you're looking at a 7% downside move to get down there. Of course, if we were to see that, it would likely be on some kind of catalyst, and I would certainly want to see that hold. But ideally, I don't want to see a retest at all. I just want to see that 50 period coming up toward the stock more quickly. Coming up at a more aggressive pace is really what I would want to see on the 4-hour. Bears, just a flattening out of this 50 period would be your ideal scenario. Keep that gap large. All right, now time for the most important chart of all, and that's going to be the daily. You can see here that, the daily does not include after hours movement. So the high in the after hours is 825.82. It's currently at 824.40. That's likely to change as the after hours are still open at the time of this recording. The all-time high previously was 823.94. So we have not reached an intraday all-time high, okay? But Nvidia actually tested an all-time high in the after hours here. So that leaves us in an interesting spot, especially on the daily chart. And we talked on Thursday about how a claim of 800 would be a huge, huge win for bulls. And not only did the bulls pull that off, but they are also pushing into new all-time highs in after hours. Again, take that with a grain of salt. It is on relatively low volume, but it's occurring. It is, of course, the real price. So a couple of things I'm watching here come Monday if I'm a bull on Nvidia. Obviously, I want to see a big hold of 800. Any retest of 800 at all, I want as many shares of volume as possible with as hard of a bounce back upside away from 800 as possible. I want a massive sample size agreeing that, yeah, 800 is being claimed as a support and there's no arguing that. If you're a bear, a big downside crack of 800 on huge volume is what you're looking for. Okay? But bulls, we have, and I suppose bears too, we have an added thing to talk about now, which is the all-time high, right? Kind of 825 up toward 850. I mean, bulls, come Monday, it's not crazy to start looking at 825 as a potential really, really short-term psychological area to reclaim, and really looking toward 850 as kind of that next psychological point to watch. Because once you start pushing into all-time highs, all you have are psychological round numbers. So I'm excited to see a test here on Nvidia come Monday if we end up seeing a hard test of all-time highs during intraday movement. When we get the real test, the most amount of volume possible. Ideally, bulls obviously hold 800, but really kind of claim 825 as a short-term support level. Push up toward that ultimate goal of 850, at least in the very short term. A claim of 850 and a hold of 850 into the close, kind of claiming that area as support on decent volume, anything but below average volume I'd be satisfied with. That'd be a great way to finish Monday as an Nvidia bull. Bears, any close below 800, you could consider a short-term win, because that would be a pretty big deal here for bears come Monday. Now, let's take a look. What were the options traders? What was their bias as we positioned ourselves here on Friday heading into Monday? And we got 2.28 million total contracts traded. 1.32 million of those were calls, and about 961,000 of those were puts. But if we break this down, this is interesting. By time frame, you get the short-term speculators, the 0 to 20 delta range, 377,000 calls, and 546,000 puts. So, I mean, listen, we're seeing every other delta range leaning call side, except for the very short-term speculators. They're actually leaning to the put side, which leads me to believe that, you have anyone with a little bit longer than a very short-term outlook on average, when you average all the volume together, they're looking toward upside on Nvidia. But in the extremely short term, those who are speculating on the very short term with the extremely out-of-the-money contracts are actually leaning slightly to the put side on average when you average all the volume together, which is a really interesting scenario as we're testing all-time highs here. Kind of gives us some insight into what options traders with kind of varying degrees of time frames are kind of thinking here on average, which is interesting. And I think a lot of people overlook that we have this data available. If you got value out of this video, I'm covering Nvidia every single day. Please subscribe to the channel. Help me hit my 5K goal by Monday market open. And I'll see you next week.